students of Reddit, what is something your teacher did that really peed the whole class? I'm glad I get to tell this story. In high school I had a teacher for pre-calc who we'll call Dr. B. She was the worst experience I've ever had with an educator, bar none. To this day, I still hate having taken that class. As a sophomore, I had never actually had a teacher who was credentialed to the point of having a doctorate. The only doctors I really knew about were medical doctors. So when I started this class, I often called her Ms. B instead of Dr. B. Every time I used the wrong title when trying to speak with her caused her to ignore me completely, and not just me, but any student who did the same. As you can imagine, most kids had this problem initially. This led to an increasingly frustrating classroom environment, to the point where no one liked her and only spoke if they absolutely had to. I tried to get better at using the proper title, but I would occasionally make a mistake. Everyone hated dealing with her, and some kids would do it on purpose just to annoy her. One day I had to use the restroom and I raised my hand to get her attention. She didn't see me at first, so I called her name, Ms. B. Can I use the restroom? This B looked me dead in the eye and then turned back to what she was doing, completely ignoring me. I was so goddamn angry I walked out and went to the restroom anyway. When I came back she tried to write me up for leaving class. I just took the referral and tore it up looking her dead in the eye. We had a bit of a standoff, you might say. A couple of my buddies were fighting to keep from laughing because I was never the rebellious type, so this was a treat for them. She let it go, so I figured that was that. When I got home, my mother asked me what happened. Turns out she called my mom about my discipline problem and said that would have to accept a referral the following day. I told my mom what happened and thankfully she understood. Most of my teachers loved me and I never had problems, so this was not a normal situation. She said she'd take care of it. The next day I get called down to the office after first period, and when I arrive my mom is there with Dr. B, the principal, and a couple of other administrators. She then proceeds to go into crazy mom mode and basically tells them that any referrals written by this teacher would be ignored, and she would not force me into any kind of in-school or out-of-school detentions. It was one of my favorite mom moments. All I could think was heck yeah, things got a little better in class after that, but I still hated her and was happy when the year was over. TLDR, Dr. B was a B. One of our lecturers at uni once. Basically, he doesn't let any of us talk to him unless we make an appointment with him. Something that takes basically 2 minutes to answer? Nope. Write an email and he'll get back to you. You stop him in a hallway to ask him a question? Nope. Only through email and scheduled times. Like even if it literally takes less time to explain something to us than to say I will only answer questions during scheduled meetings. So email me and we can arrange something. He will insist on scheduling you in and then locking himself in his office. That's one way to pee off an entire year group of students. Didn't happen to me, but it was in the news recently. In a school a number of students were assigned to take over for some teachers who had to go to a conference and were told to wear business attire and only bring small bags. No backpacks allowed. Some of them brought backpacks because they lived far away from the school and had to bring a change of clothes, laptops, etc. because they needed to do schoolwork later that day. The faculty member in charge got so pissed he burned their backpacks and other bigger bags with all those belongings inside and called them stupid because they didn't get their phone out from their backpacks. TLDR. Students brought backpacks and their backpacks were burned with everything inside it. New teacher introduces herself and says, translated for convenience, my name is Ms. Fight and if you don't behave I'll live up to it. It was freaking on from this moment. Pick their nose as if no one could see and very badly sneakily swiped it on a guy called Rory's back when he wasn't paying attention. Pure mental. Our Slovenian language teacher in middle school was from a different region of the country than us. For reference, Slovenian is a ridiculously hard language even for us native speakers, and it does not help that it's also incredibly fragmented by dialects, both minor ones spoken only in a few places and major, regional ones. And it's practically impossible to speak the same formal language written in the books. It sounds incredibly stiff. Then there's the issue with tonemic, think sing-song pronunciation, and non-tonemic, harsher, choppy sounding accent. They are both considered correct, However, and here's our problem. We are from the region next to the border with Austria, and German had a lot of influence on everyday language here. We use non-tonemic pronunciation and have serious issues with tonemic. We simply cannot talk that way. Our teacher was from the region where they used tonemic pronunciation, and she was adamant how our pronunciation is incorrect and utterly inferior compared to hers, in a really insulting way, and we spoke perfectly normal, semi-formal everyday Slovenian used practically everywhere. She went on and on and on about this in every lesson, so we refused to even try learning the tonemic way. It wasn't even a part of the lessons. It was just her pet peeve with us. And a few of the kids in class were from places where they still speak those almost impossible to understand dialects, so they only spoke in those to her. Our little linguistic rebellion was glorious and she couldn't do a single thing to stop it. 9th and 10th grade science teacher had a pretty outspoken hatred of 9th graders because they were fresh out of middle school and still babies. She also had the habit of trying to make herself seem smarter, cooler than she actually was by frequently telling the same stories about a trip to Africa, how she went to college and has a degree in biology, etc. She was honestly just an all-around bitter old bag, so I'm not surprised she was fired not too long ago. She always went off topic when we had a class with her. We had classic literature, and she starts the lesson, makes 2 sentences and goes on about how we should gift her and her children stuff for their birthdays to show respect and appreciation. Or she started talking about stuff she got no clue whatsoever. It was a disaster. I ended up switching high schools because of it. Failing 2 whole sections consisting of almost 50 students each in final semester because she thought she was above everyone else, and her petty issues with colleges who was at the time our in charge. My main teacher is really not fitted for the job. She openly tells the entire class who got the worst grade. Most of the time it's a foreign student because she doesn't give him the tools he needs during tests so he can actually understand all of it. Several times I've been yelled at for being sick and not getting all papers I should have from her, even though she is obligated to offer me help if I've been sick. Because of this I was so stressed out at one point and pressured during class that I started to well up, so I discreetly turned away. She told the whole class while it happened in a belittling way that I was upset. This was my first year at this school. No one likes her, but the school still keeps her around. My math teacher for 9 years. He bullied me and shamed me in front of the whole class as often as he could get away with it. Called me fat, stupid, lazy, in any way he could think of without actually using the words. It was one of the main reasons that I turned into that odd kid that even the bullied kids at the school bullied. So yeah, that sorta pee me off, especially every time I think back on it. As an adult, I've had the extreme pleasure to run into a couple of my more horrible teachers. My favorite time was when this particular bully of a teacher ran into me at the grocery store and started talking to me, trying to reminisce about old times like they were good. I just smiled big and said, "Frick you." The look on her face satisfies me to this day. One teacher screamed at my, admittedly annoying, class, "I don't get paid enough to take this crap," when I was 11. Another was obsessed with keeping our classroom clean. She kept students back after class to clean because she found pen marks on their desks, which I know for a fact were there before. On the other hand, I had an amazing history teacher who had a great gift for telling stories and used to bring out strategy board games so we could play through Napoleonic battles. She had sex with a student's father, which made his parents have a divorce. She was his pretty hated, got her car scratched and popped the wheels by other students. She did something in another class, asked a student to handle a jar of mercury, and the student, being the pubescent see that all high school students are, drops it on the cement floor, causing the entire school to turn into a biohazard zone for 6 months, involving the EPA from halfway around the world. To top it off, she made the students clean it up. The students played with the crap, and the incident went near unreported until said students got sick from mercury poisoning. Various teachers said that 1. Gay sex is equivalent to eating dirt. 2. Being gay is a choice. 3. People with specific disabilities shouldn't have sex if they can't procreate. 4. If you're born with an extra appendage, that extra appendage is evil. 5. Dogs don't have feelings. Yep, I went to Catholic school. Even the students that were Catholic thought those statements were outrageous. If you're born with an extra appendage, that extra appendage is evil. It wasn't me that killed him, officer. It was my evil third nipple. Oh, I've had so many. First teacher was new to the school and taught us science in year 10. She was always 20 minutes late to class. She was a fun teacher, but our lessons were only 40 minutes, so we'd literally waste half a lesson being late. Pee me off no end. Another teacher lost 2 years worth of my science coursework, which I had to read by the end of the week. That was 3 days. I'm surprised I got the grade I did and she didn't help. And finally the doctor. This one makes me laugh. I don't know how the rest of you address your teachers, but here in England it's common to call them Miss and Sir, but not the latest science teacher in year 10. Oh no, you had to address her as doctor, followed by her name, which was incredibly close to a well-known vegetable, which we took advantage of. And if you didn't, she wouldn't answer or even acknowledge you. She asked if she could hit us. Asked our parents if she Oh, and every substitute ever who thought they were God when they walked into the room. Which vegetable? My math teacher in 8th grade gave us back a class test, but unfortunately forgot mine, which he then corrected in front of the whole class. I wasn't good at maths at that time and I got a 5. German grades go from 1 best to 6 worst. He even commented on this like, where's task 2B, Lucas? I can't find it here. I obviously didn't do it because I couldn't solve it. The whole class told him to stop, but he proceeded. I took it with humor, but I really wanted to go to the headmistress. There was this one terrible teacher who every class would get at least one thing very obviously wrong and would yell at the entire class if she was corrected. One time she said a gold nugget looked like an anvil, and on her last day she sent 4 of us to the principal's office. 1 for dropping his pen, 1 other for whispering to his friend, 1 more for having an opinion on the topic, and then me for asking her not to call my friends useless and flea-ridden dogs. We all threw a party when she finally left. She always insulted us and made us all feel worthless. Not a teacher, but a middle school security guard. I was running to class and the bell rang right as I was getting in the classroom's door. Well, apparently numbnuts saw me enter at just that time, so he pulled me out of class to give me detention because in his eyes I was tardy. Legit made me miss class time because I was 1 second late for class. Frick you, Mr. Twinkie. You gigantic waste of space. Man. 5th grade, we had a sub who was a real bee. From making a kid cry for not bringing a pencil, to slapping her desk every 5 minutes for no reason. But one incident stands out. During maths, the class was quite rowdy because we had pay later. So, being the massive stuck-up bee that she was, she suddenly stops writing, erases the board and angrily tells us to put our books in the bag and get out a piece of paper and write down what she was writing down before she erased it. Whoever didn't do it wouldn't be allowed to go out for pay. The class went apeshit. No one could remember anything except for a handful of kids, who were allowed to leave. I eventually had enough and, while she was on her desk staring at her mug, secretly got my notebook out under the desk and copied half onto the paper. She was satisfied enough that it wasn't empty and let me go. Soon enough half the class did the same. From my 11-year-old self. Frick you, Mrs. Georgina. The ironic thing is I now teach high school level maths. In high school, one of my teachers would hear the bell go off for home time and keep us in for 10 extra minutes if we were being noisy. She'd add 10 extra minutes each time someone made a sound and we'd miss our school taxis and buses. So I just finished my high school, so soon I should go to university. But during my 4th year of high school, my class had this new German teacher who was totally unbearable. She kept shouting at everyone and giving bad notes too without any proper reason. Once we had this test where only 2 people got at least 6+ and all the others were insufficient, so everyone was already mad at her. But then she did the worst thing she could have possibly done. I took in my test a honest 4. Not too good in German. My fault. Although I tried to do my best nonetheless. Yet she calls me in front of everyone and she just says that I am retarded in the language because even if I study I am a failure. Useless to say that everyone got pee off at her, as we were a very supportive class and started reporting her to the principal and started boycotting her lessons as well. From what I've heard, these things happened also in other classes, and she in fact didn't get to renew the contract the later year, thankfully, but because of her I stopped having interest in German, a language I studied for 7 years, and other had the same effect. But now, I've got that interest back thanks to another good and supportive teacher. Moral of the story: bad teachers can really destroy the interest of one student into a subject. In 8th grade, we had a German teacher. She couldn't handle our class. We were terrible, I'll admit. At one point she got so frustrated with one little group in the back of the class and started yelling at them. One of the boys talked back and she told him to shut up and go back to where he came from. He was of Afghan descent. That was the moment crap hit the fan. The whole class started screaming at her. She walked out crying, and the class wrecked the classroom, writing stuff on the blackboard. Thing was said and written down I'm not proud of to have been a part of. She was German herself, and a lesbian, so it became personal and nasty real quick. Next week she was back as our teacher and everything seemed fine. I guess she and the boy she targeted had a talk and she apologized. The situation was never talked about again. But German class was never fun, and I don't think anyone chose to do German the next year. Not actually my teacher, but the teacher who ran the lower freshman English class, who most of my friends had. So the honors class and the lower class both read the same short story and were both assigned a writing assignment. One class was given a 400-word essay, the other got a 150-word paragraph. You would guess the honors class got the essay, right? Wrong. The lower English class got the bigger assignment, and almost the entire class failed it because they hadn't been taught how to write an essay yet. Meanwhile, us in the honors class passed with flying colors because we were taught beforehand how to write what we needed to write. Accused our class of stealing. The class consisted of 12 and 13-year-old children. By the end of the class, just before lunch, the teacher discovered her keys were missing and decided to hold us back for 15 minutes, giving people the opportunity to confess. A confession did not happen, and this led to us missing our lunch slot and not eating unless you had a packed lunch. At the beginning of our afternoon lessons, our head of year as well as a pastoral care manager came to our class to let us know all our personal belongings would be searched at the end of the lesson if the keys were not turned over. This lesson lasted 50 minutes. After 30, both returned to say the keys had been returned and thanked us. They did, however, forget that from our current classroom we could see directly into the original classroom. These stolen keys were pulled from the back of her drawer and quickly pocketed. We had a new teacher just over a month after the incident due to further complaints. No apology was issued. Burnt our Pokemon cards because they are demons or something. Went to a religious school and apparently we are trying to control demon monsters. Anyway, they took them all from our bags during the peak Pokemon card fad like 15-20 years ago and burned them all in big pile. You misunderstood. This was a ritual sacrifice to call forth based god Mutwo. First day as a new teacher in our school. She came from a private school originally. Asked the class what a hyperbole was and we were silent as we hadn't heard the term before. She rudely goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was teaching a top set English class." Everyone in the class unanimously agrees after the teacher leaves to go get photocopies to make that teacher's life a living heck. Some students piped up and said she was just as rude as that when talking to her tutor group. Cue the next few weeks of being angels with our original teacher and being the worst class ever with the rude one plus complaining about the rude teacher to our original one and getting our parents to send in complaints about the rude one. We had her fired by Christmas. Teamwork makes the dream work. We had a class that was split between boys and girls via foreign exchange. Female student walked into her all-girls class with a new haircut. It was a bowl cut, straight across, and the teacher said, "Sorry bud, wrong class." Proceeded to make her cry. Nothing happened to her though. So she tells everybody if they fail a specific quiz she will call our parents. We got them back and my friend got like 49% and she was going to call his parents. Then it turns out she counted wrong and he ended up getting 51%. He still got his parents called. Teacher probably spent like half of each car on her phone. My 8th grade teacher spent the second semester making us write 20-page research papers. She made them a huge portion of our grade and talked about how important this was for us to complete to prepare for high school and university. I worked 3 months on it and spent weekends in the library downtown researching. I was so proud of myself when I handed it in, as it was my first real research paper. I mean at an 8th grade level, of course. She never even looked at it, never graded it, never got it back. I was one of 30 kids she did this to. Frick you, Mrs. M. Had a professor in uni that didn't grade a single assignment or test until the end of the semester. Not sure if you're doing the homework right, neither does he. Worried about that brutal exam nobody seemed to do well on. Hope you can wait 3 months to see it. Have question about that project you turned in? No you don't. Because you don't know what you got right or wrong. It wasn't until the last week of the semester that everybody's grade was put into the system. Needless to say, that royally screwed some people. Oh, he also had us all write a 15-page essay on subjects related to the class, complete with sources, a cover page, etc. Only to say forget about it on the day it was due. This didn't pee off the whole class, but it would have if they had known about it. Basically found out a tutor at a polytechnic would give 100% marks for handing in work. Started getting 100% for sending in blank Word documents. It was 3rd year economics at university and we were in a tutorial where a few of us were given topics a week or so ago to prepare and then present in front of the class. Now this teacher was pretty weird. He was the kind that signed off emails to his class as your friend, and tried to make jokes in class to make us like him. To be fair, I found him hilarious and he actually used real money to explain economic theory which we could keep if we won at his game. Anyway, each person had to present their topic and at the end we were all given a peer-to-peer feedback sheet where he made us rate each presenter and add pro and cons comments about them. I had seen peer-to-peer reviews before where you wrote comments, but I found it quite strange that we had to rate our peers out of 10. My theory was that he wanted to use our grading system to then decide final marks for the presentations as he was busy slaying creatures in Azeroth on his iPad. What really made the class tick was when he then asked us to go around individually and read our ratings and comments out loud to the class. We then all got up and protested like it was a riot. That was not cool, Urgent. Not cool. One of our teachers taught 2 different classes. They were 2 completely different classes, like US history and English. It just so happened, one day both classes were to have tests. The teacher also had to take that day off because of a family emergency. However, since it was test day for his classes, he figured a sub could handle it. No biggie, right? Well, turns out the sub couldn't handle that. My class was given the US history test, even though we weren't the US history class. Nearly everyone pointed it out, told her we had the wrong tests, but the sub just snapped at everyone and told us to take the test. US history was a junior level class and we were all freshmen. No one actually knew the material. The sub threatened detention if we didn't take the test. So, we took it. I actually did my best because, in my mind, I thought the sub was grading it. Most of everyone else put joke answers on it though. Next day, our teacher gave us the real test. After class he told me I did really well on the US history test for someone who never took the class. He gave me some extra credit grade towards my real test for doing so well. Obligatory, not me, but a friend studied physics at Manchester and had Professor Brian Cox as a lecturer. Lots of her tutorials in first year ended up cancelled because he was getting special leave to make TV programs for the BCC. He was also one of the only members of faculty who wasn't obliged to do research. I guess his fame brought a lot of good publicity for the uni. Nevertheless, everyone who studied under him was pretty p. In year 8, finished year 13 now, we had a Spanish teaching assistant who was becoming an actual teacher soon. We had a class and she literally didn't turn up for the whole lesson. So we were all excited and were messing around slightly, all taking selfies and stuff like that. And some of the kids in our class went to search for her even, and a couple people found her and she didn't care and still didn't come back to the class. After our fun ended later in the day, when confronted by the head, she tried to say she had no idea she had that class even though some people literally told her, and she tried to get us into trouble for not finding her. In university, our tutor didn't tell us about the extra credit work experience shows, which was optional, And then after the first show called us all lazy and useless in an email for not scheduling it between the class because it meant he had to do the work instead. I turned up for 2 of the shows to help because I felt bad, but he then laid into me about not coming to the first show. So I didn't turn up again. He emailed and asked me why I didn't show up, as he didn't go in because he thought I would be there, and CC'd in his boss and the head of the department. But my response: it's optional extra work that was meant for the whole class. I've done 2 days worth, which is the only time I can spare, both of which I did on short notice after your first email, which I've included screenshots of. I would love to help out more, but unfortunately I had prior commitments which couldn't be cancelled on such short notice as you've given us for this work. I'm glad I did not come to help at this show, as the extra credit opportunity was only meant to be shadowing you, not doing the work itself, and a student without you to supervise would have not been able to cope with the show. His boss emailed back, thanking me for letting him know this was going on. Tutor had to go to training sessions, write an email of apology to us, and got a warning. AP World History teacher handed back our graded tests while complaining about how poorly the class did as a whole. Average was a high D, I think. Students noticed that several of our answers were correct, found proof in our textbook, showed teacher. Her response is that we were not supposed to study what the textbook said but what she said. Teacher was older and just counting down to retirement. After that, students complained and she no longer taught AP or honors courses. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.